A terrible accident happened on the way home, killing many people. But miraculously, one family survived, without a scratch. Why were they protected between life and death? Was it just luck, or was there something deeper? In today's society, where people increasingly put their faith in reason and science, this story opens up a different perspective about the power of prayer, about quiet but persistent faith, and about unexpected conspiracies. The story of Mr. John and his family is not just a personal incident, but a reminder for all of us. Sometimes survival is not about speed or money, but in a whisper to the sky. There are journeys we plan, and those that silently prepare us. 2 weeks before the festive season, the home of Mr. John was alive with laughter, chatter, and the smell of last-minute packing. Children dashed from room to room, excitedly shouting plans about their upcoming trip to the village. The house was full of fire, both literally with the stove working overtime for food preparations and emotionally with the fire of anticipation. To them, this was the most magical time of the year, the only time they would return to their ancestral home to reconnect with extended family, to run through the big green forests, to laugh with childhood friends, and to bask in the fragrant air of tradition and joy. But beneath the excitement lay something else. Uju, Mr. John's wife, moved quickly and silently around the house, checking and rechecking their bags, folding clothes, stacking food, and wrapping little surprise gifts for the village kids. She had done this every year, without fail. Always a day before departure, always perfectly timed. But this year, something was different. She kept glancing toward the window as if expecting someone, or something. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tied up the last bundle. What weighed on her heart was not the road, nor the journey, nor even the destination. It was her husband. Mr. John, unlike Uju, never said goodbye before a trip. He never paused to pray or to acknowledge the risk of traveling with a full car and a vulnerable family. "God already knows I'm leaving," he would say with a laugh, waving his hand as if brushing off a fly. No need for all that drama. But to Uju, it was not drama, it was devotion. She believed that saying a prayer before leaving wasn't just routine, it was protection. It was the invisible shield she hoped would follow their family wherever they went. "John, can we just say goodbye properly? Just 2 minutes?" she asked quietly while loading the bags into the trunk. John smiled, raising his hand like he was taming a wild horse. "Uju, don't worry me. I'm not dying. We're just going to the village." And yet, Uju's heart remained heavy. She watched him with eyes that pleaded more than her words. Why didn't he understand? Why couldn't he just pause, hold their hands, and say a few words of faith? Even the children had started mimicking their father's indifference. "Why do we have to pray before every trip, Mama?" they'd ask with a chuckle, nudging her as she knelt in the early morning light. But Uju never stopped. Whether with them or alone, she always prayed for their safety, asking God to shield them on every road, at every turn. And in that final moment before leaving, as the car engine rumbled to life and the sun stretched across the horizon, she looked back at the house, placed her hand on her heart, and whispered under her breath, "Lord, keep us safe this year too. Let no evil follow us to Namchukwu's land." Inside the car, joy overflowed. Children giggled about what they'd do when they arrived. Mr. John laughed heartily at their innocence, but Uju sat quietly, eyes scanning the road ahead. The warmth of the family's love could be felt like sunlight streaming through the windshield, but in the shadows of her mind, a quiet unease lingered. She didn't know why. She couldn't explain how. But something in her spirit told her this year wouldn't be like the rest. And deep down, she prayed that her quiet voice, often ignored, often brushed aside, would be heard in heaven louder than ever before. Sometimes, a warning comes disguised as kindness, and it's only later that you realize it tried to save your life. The morning sun was just beginning to rise over the narrow country road as Mr. John made his way home from work. The dirt path was familiar, winding, quiet, lined with trees whispering to one another in the breeze. He was tired but content, thinking about the upcoming trip to the village with his family. The kids were already buzzing with excitement, and Uju, as always, had prepared everything days in advance. It was shaping up to be another peaceful holiday, until he saw her. Standing on the side of the road was an old woman, frail, her back slightly hunched under the weight of time. She wore a faded wrapper and held a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her gray hair peeked out beneath a scarf tied around her head. As Mr. John slowed down, she raised one hand, not in desperation, but in quiet expectation. He rolled down the window. "Mama, are you okay? Where are you headed?" he asked with polite concern. Her voice was dry yet clear. "My son, I'm going to the next village. Can you take me there?" Without hesitation, Mr. John unlocked the door. "Hop in, Mama," he said. The old woman climbed in slowly, with a calmness that almost unsettled him. She didn't ask about the car. She didn't comment on the road. She just stared straight ahead, eyes unblinking, bundle resting on her lap. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves outside the windows. Then softly she spoke. "My son, I hope you won't be afraid of what I'm about to say." That sentence alone made his knuckles tighten on the wheel, but he laughed it off. "No worries, Mama, go ahead." The old woman turned slightly to look at him, her gaze sharp, almost unnatural. "Don't go to that village, not this time. Stay away, something is not right this year." Mr. John blinked. "Excuse me?" "I know you go every year for Christmas," she continued, her voice firm but not angry. "But this year is different. Evil waits on the road and joy will turn to sorrow. I've seen it before. I've warned before." He paused. A part of him wanted to listen. Another part dismissed it outright. "Mama, I've traveled this road for years. Nothing ever happens." She said nothing more. Just sat there, quietly. When they reached the fork in the road, she asked to be dropped off. Before she stepped out, she turned back one last time and placed her hand gently on the dashboard. "Remember my words, son. Not all danger comes with thunder. Some walk quietly. Some look like family." And then she was gone, walking slowly down the dusty path, fading into the mist as though she had never been there. Mr. John sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The car was suddenly colder. A chill brushed his arms. "People love scaring others with stories," he muttered. "She's probably just lonely. Or superstitious." Still, as he drove home, something about her voice clung to the back of his mind like a shadow that refused to fall away. The old woman hadn't looked lost. She hadn't looked scared. In fact, she had looked certain. But the real question wasn't whether she was right or wrong, it was whether anyone would believe her, before it was too late. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who smiles at you every year. In the village where traditions ran deeper than rivers and silence often spoke louder than words, an old woman sat in front of her crumbling clay house, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Mama Amaka, known by many as a quiet widow, by others as a grieving mother. But what no one truly saw was the fire that burned behind those tired eyes, an ancient anger that had festered quietly for years. Every Christmas season, she watched the same scene unfold. The green Toyota bus would pull into the village, dust swirling behind it like smoke trailing from a fire. Mr. John and his family, his proud laughter, his beautiful wife Uju, and those children bouncing out of the car like they owned the land. Every year, they arrived with gifts, music, and clothes that smelled like the city. And every year, they were met with smiles, even hers. But this year, Mama Amaka had decided something. "This ends now," she whispered. He doesn't get to shine while my son lies in the ground. No one remembered her boy anymore. Not the village, not the visitors, and certainly not Mr. John. But Mama Amaka remembered everything. How they had grown up as boys, how Mr. John had climbed over everyone to succeed, and how her own child had disappeared in the shadow of his success. The bitterness had aged her faster than time, and so she called the only person she trusted, Mama Azy, her closest friend and secret keeper. "He's coming again," Mama Amaka said with her voice low but steady. Mama Azy didn't ask who. She knew. It was just before dawn when the two old women slipped away into the dense forest, their feet moving with purpose down a path known only to the oldest villagers, the trail that led to the Grove of Whispers. That was what they called it, but everyone knew what it really was: the home of the forest spirits, where the air was thick with secrets, and the wind never blew twice in the same direction. They walked until the trees opened up to a clearing. There, waiting, was her. An old priestess, neither alive nor dead, sat by a blackened stone circle, her face painted in charcoal, her eyes hidden behind a veil of twigs. Her voice was like firewood cracking. "Why have you come?" she asked, not turning her head. "My son's enemy returns. I want his road broken. I want his strength scattered. I want his joy undone," Mama Amaka said, kneeling slowly. The priestess reached for a bowl filled with oil and ash. "Then you must offer something real, not a lie, not a coin, blood." Mama Amaka's hands trembled. From her wrapper, she drew a small cloth pouch, Mr. John's old wristband, stained and worn. "From his last visit," she said. The priestess nodded. "Good. Now speak his name, and may your curse know no mercy." What followed was a ritual older than memory. Chanting that echoed into the trees, symbols drawn into the dirt with bones. A dark brew stirred with wind whispers and the scent of revenge. And when the final word was spoken, the earth trembled beneath them. Not violently, but just enough to know something ancient had awakened. As they walked home, Mama Amaka didn't smile, but her chest felt lighter. "I didn't want to do it," she said softly to Mama Azy. "But you did," her friend replied. "And now, we wait." Because sometimes the greatest threat doesn't come from guns or storms. It comes from a heart too wounded to forgive, and a tradition too old to question. The road to disaster never looks dangerous at first. It often begins with songs, laughter, and a sense of normal. That morning, the sky stretched wide with gentle clouds, and the air carried a strange stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Mr. John and his family were finally ready. The green bus was loaded to the brim with food, gifts, clothes, and everything Uju had meticulously packed. The children were singing, bouncing with joy, completely unaware that they were walking straight into something far bigger than a holiday trip. Inside the house, Uju took one last glance at the kitchen, the living room, the place where her prayers had lingered. She called everyone to the sitting room and said with a calm but firm voice, "Let's pray before we leave." As always, Mr. John rolled his eyes, half smiling. "Uju, what is it with you and prayers? We're going to the village, not the battlefield." But Uju didn't argue. She knelt down anyway, and so did the children, half out of habit, half out of love for their mother. She whispered a prayer so deep it almost trembled the floor beneath them. "Lord, surround us. Go before us. Let no unseen evil touch us. Let no arrow fly against us that you have not already broken." When she opened her eyes, she could feel it, that quiet weight, like something unfinished in the air. And then they left. The bus rumbled out of their driveway and onto the open road. The children clapped excitedly every time they passed a town, waving at people, pointing at animals, laughing at road signs. Mr. John drove with ease, talking about how he planned to surprise the family elders with bottles of palm wine. But Uju sat quietly in the back, eyes steady on the horizon. She didn't know what it was exactly. Maybe the woman on the roadside still haunted her. Maybe it was just mother's instinct. But every bump in the road felt sharper. Every sound outside the window rang a little louder than it should. There was no storm, but inside her, thunder rumbled. Even joy can be a disguise when fate is waiting just around the bend. They stopped briefly at a market near the main bus terminal to rest and grab some water. The place was bustling, vendors shouting, horns honking, women haggling over prices. Amidst the noise, Uju gathered the children and called again for prayer. "Let's pray one more time," she said. Mr. John was visibly annoyed. "Uju, please! You're making us look crazy in front of strangers. We already prayed." But Uju didn't care about looks. She cared about safety. And something in her spirit screamed that they were not safe. So she stood, hands raised slightly, and prayed aloud in the middle of the crowd. Some stared, some whispered, but a few watched with silent respect. Back in the vehicle, the children had quieted down. Mr. John turned the key. The engine sputtered and kicked into gear. They merged back onto the road, unaware that ahead, the tracks of fate had already shifted. Further up the path, just past a winding curve where the trees thickened and the road narrowed, a different vehicle was waiting. A tanker. Its brakes were worn, its driver half asleep. And time, as it does, began to tighten. You never know the value of a prayer until it's the only thing left standing. The road had been smooth for hours. Too smooth, almost unnaturally so. Mr. John tapped the steering wheel in rhythm with the radio. The children had fallen asleep one by one, heads bobbing gently with the motion of the bus. Uju sat near the back, her hand resting on a small Bible she never traveled without. She stared out the window, watching trees blur into green streaks, trying to ignore the lump in her throat. She couldn't shake the feeling. Something was coming. She didn't know when or how, but it was coming. The sun dipped slightly lower as the bus climbed a hill that curved tightly into the next valley. From the opposite side, a fuel tanker crept forward, its tired driver blinking against the weight of fatigue, his hands sluggish on the wheel. The tanker's brakes were faulty. Its cargo was heavy, and fate, in all its cruel precision, had placed both vehicles on the same stretch of earth at the same moment in time. The next seconds happened too fast, and yet they lasted forever. A blare of horns, the shriek of tires, Mr. John's voice shouting something no one could understand. And then, impact. Metal crumpled like paper, glass shattered into screams. The bus spun violently before slamming into a roadside ditch. The tanker flipped. Fire burst from its undercarriage, painting the sky with smoke and flame. Silence followed, a brutal, hollow silence. Then, slowly, cries, whimpers, breathing. Uju opened her eyes. Her forehead was bleeding, but her mind was sharp. She screamed for her children. "Kioma, Ebuka, where are you?" Little voices answered, shaking, crying, but alive. One by one, she pulled them out of the wreckage. The heat scorched the air around them, but a strange bubble of stillness seemed to shield them. Not a single bone was broken. Not a single child lost. She looked around and saw Mr. John, crushed between the dashboard and the steering wheel, alive but unconscious. His leg was twisted unnaturally, pinned beneath a twisted piece of metal. Emergency responders arrived nearly an hour later. Paramedics rushed to the scene, pulling survivors from the wreck and covering the lost with white cloths. But when they reached Uju and her children, the disbelief was visible. "How did they make it out of that?" one whispered. "They were sitting right in the fire's path." They were bruised, bloodied, but whole. One nurse knelt beside Uju and asked gently, "Ma'am, what saved you?" Uju looked up, eyes filled with tears. "Prayer," she said simply. "Nothing else, just prayer." Mr. John was rushed to the hospital. He would survive, but his leg could not be saved. When he awoke, his first vision was not of doctors or machines, but of Uju sitting by his side, holding his hand, her lips whispering yet another prayer. And when the old woman, the one who had warned him, entered the hospital room, he wept. "I didn't listen," he said, his voice breaking. The old woman smiled. "You don't have to listen to me. You just have to listen to the one who hears her." She nodded toward Uju. Because sometimes it's not the seatbelt, or the timing, or even the luck. It's the quiet voice in the back seat, the one that never stops praying, even when no one else believes. The real battle wasn't on the road, it was in the spirit. And the one who prayed the quietest fought the hardest. The hospital room was still. The air smelled of disinfectant and fading flowers. Machines beeped steadily beside Mr. John's bed, each sound a small reminder that he was alive, but not whole. One leg was gone, taken by the wreckage. His body had survived, but his soul, his understanding of the world, was somewhere between shattered pride and shaken belief. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting pain. But instead, he saw Uju, sitting right there, her head bowed, hands clasped together, whispering into the stillness. She looked up and gasped with joy. "You're awake." Mr. John blinked, voice weak. What happened?" "You survived," she said, eyes shining. "We all did." In that moment he remembered everything. The curve in the road, the truck, the fire, and then darkness. But also a strange feeling of being wrapped in something invisible, something unbreakable. Before he could speak again, the door creaked open, and in stepped the old woman from the roadside, the one he had given a ride to just days earlier. Except now, she didn't look so fragile. Her back was straighter, her eyes were clearer, her voice was thunder in a whisper. "You should not have gone," she said softly, "but you were protected." Mr. John stared, disbelief written across his face. "Who are you?" The old woman smiled faintly. "Someone sent to warn you, someone who sees beyond what you call real." He wanted to protest, to explain, to argue, but she raised her hand. "It wasn't my words that saved your family," she continued. "It was hers." She turned to Uju. "Her prayers built a shield around your children, around her, even around you. You didn't believe, but heaven listens even when husbands don't." Mr. John's eyes welled with tears. He turned to Uju, who sat silently, not needing to say anything. Her faith had spoken louder than words. Then the woman revealed the truth, dark and sharp like broken glass. Mama Amaka and others called upon spirits, old ones, angry ones. They cursed the road. But the curse could not pass through what was covered in faith. You were supposed to die. All of you. But her prayers, she pointed again at Uju, were stronger than their curses. Mr. John broke. Tears ran down his face. Tears of shame, of regret, of realization. "I mocked her," he whispered. "I laughed at the one thing that saved me." The old woman nodded slowly. "Many do, until the fire comes, until they see that the invisible is more real than the visible." She walked to the door, paused, and turned one last time. "Let this be your lesson, son. Never underestimate the one who kneels for you. Her silence is not weakness. Her faith is not foolish. Her prayer is not wasted." She left the room, and the silence returned. But this time, it was sacred. From that day forward, Mr. John was a changed man, no longer the one who waved off warnings, no longer the man too proud to bow his head. Every morning, he would wake before sunrise, call his children, and gather the family in a circle. His voice would be the loudest in prayer. His eyes would be the first to close in gratitude. Because some men learn the hard way that the greatest warriors don't carry swords. They carry prayers whispered when no one else is listening. Some stories are whispered behind closed doors. Others echo across generations. After the accident, after the blood and fire and prayers, Mr. John was no longer the man he once was. The proud stride was gone, replaced by a crutch and a limp that reminded him of what could have been lost. But more than that, something deeper had shifted. Something eternal. He no longer saw the world with the same eyes. In the early mornings, before the birds began to sing, he would be the first to rise. The same man who once brushed off prayer now lit candles in the corner of the living room and called his family to gather. "Let's thank God for another day," he'd say. His voice wasn't dramatic or loud, it was anchored, as if he now spoke not from tradition, but from truth. Every morning, Uju stood beside him, hands interlaced, tears often welling in her eyes, not out of pain, but reverence. She had always believed, always prayed. But now, her husband stood with her, shoulder to shoulder, faith to faith. The man who once mocked her, whispered petitions, now led them with his own. He became a living testimony in their community. People who had doubted the power of prayer, the existence of spiritual warfare, or even the idea of miracles, now sat in silence when he entered the room. At first, out of pity, later, out of awe, because there's something unshakable about a man who's met death and come back changed. Mr. John refused to return to the village for an entire year, not out of fear, but out of discernment. He knew now that not every smile is sincere, not every tradition is harmless, and not every family reunion is rooted in love. He needed time. Time to heal. Time to listen. Time to rebuild what arrogance had once blinded him from seeing. It wasn't until Mama Amaka passed away, a death as quiet and unsettling as the curse she had sent, that Mr. John felt peace enough to return. But this time, he didn't go with songs or gifts or noisy celebration. He went with humility. And when he arrived, he didn't step into the old family house first. He went straight to the small church at the edge of the village, the one with broken pews and dust-covered hymnals. There, he knelt, alone, and wept. The village began to talk as villages always do, but this time, they weren't gossiping about his money or his car. They spoke of his change, his courage, his faith. They told their children the story of the man who had everything, lost everything, and gained something greater, the understanding that unseen things hold the greatest power. And slowly, the tale of Mr. John and the fire that spared his family became more than a story. It became a symbol. Pastors preached about it. Mothers prayed like Uju. Fathers started kneeling in the morning. The story traveled beyond their village, into markets, churches, and city buses. People whispered it over evening fires and posted it on walls with the caption, "Never underestimate the power of a praying woman." Years later, when his children had grown, they still remembered that journey, not as a tragedy, but as the moment their father became a warrior of a different kind. One who didn't fight with fists or fury, but with faith. And every time someone asked Mr. John why he changed, he would answer the same way. "Because God showed up when I didn't deserve it, and my wife, she prayed me home." In life, there are dangers that do not come from knives or obvious accidents, but from people's hearts and things that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Mr. John's story is a testament to a profound lesson. The power of faith and silent prayer can save an entire family from disaster. Many times, those who always silently sacrifice, like his wife Uju, are the strongest pillars in the family. In a world full of turmoil and calculation, the most precious thing is not wealth or fame, but family love, faith in goodness, and sincere prayers. For those who have gone through many ups and downs in life, this story is like a wake-up call, a reminder that peace does not come from human wisdom, but from a heart that knows how to be humble, know how to pray, and know how to listen. Sometimes, slowing down, looking deeply into seemingly small things, is the wisest way to live.